podcast role. Welcome in.
You're listening to an Imperfect Leader, the Superintendents and Leadership Podcast. Hello, Jamie.
Hey, Peter. How are you doing today?
I'm doing okay. Yeah, no, I really am doing okay. I am kind of curious. You are now, you've kind of settled like throughout the last season and into this season. You were kind of remote living. You were a nomad. I mean, you had homes, but you were all over the place. And now you are fully suburban.
We are. We've landed. It's something this is Leo's in full. We have gone full suburbia. Like he is full friends with 5 or 6 other boys in the neighborhood, and they just all get together every afternoon and ride around on their bikes. And it's gotten to the point where
he comes home, drops everything, and runs out.
We have to calm him down take a minute. Now, okay, go ahead. And they're so wild, all of these 6-year-old and 7-year-old boys, that I'm like, no, get the f*** out of my house. No, you can't be in the house.
I never let them in. I never let them in.
I used to be totally fine, but it's so beyond me now that I'm like, no, it's a beautiful day. Go out.
I'm like, I gotta sweep up all that mutton mess.
Yeah. And then they're like, we want to play this. I'm like, I don't care what you want to play. You're not playing that. And they're like, we want a snack. I was like, I have carrots. Do you want carrots? I'm like, no. That's what I got. Those are the offerings. You don't want a snack. You want the Halloween candy. I'm not getting you that.
That's right. But I'm hungry. Yeah, I got carrots.
Yeah, here's carrots. I'll stretch. Here's grapes. So it's suddenly, I'm my grandfather. Like, I'm going to have these rules.
I was thinking of whatever the neighbor was in Dennis the Menace. Yeah.
Okay. What's his name? What was the neighbor's name in Dennis the Menace? Mr.
Wilson?
Wilson. Jesus, good call. Gosh, that's ancient. That's ancient news. Does Dennis the Menace is that even a reference anymore?
How about Marmaduke?
Talk about it. I used to read the comics in the paper, and that was one of my least favorite. Marmaduke was always my least favorite.
Terrible.
Just a family circus, too. Like, what? I don't get it. What's this?
I know. And I wanted to like Hagar the Horrible, but no, couldn't get it. And then there was like the Prince Valiant, because I didn't read it like regularly, and I had no idea what was happening.
That's the best. Oh, that's the best.
And then I guess if you look at like, aren't they like all like crusade stories anyway? So it seemed like indoctrination of some sort. I don't know.
No, I took Joaquin down the one I loved too, but was Boondocks and Calvin and Hobbes. For those.
Oh, sure. Boondocks. Amazing. Yeah. Calvin and Hobbes. Amazing.
Yeah. And then I bought the books and we read them together and we still laugh.
Yeah. We've got them upstairs. The boys argue about them, about whose room it stays in.
That's so interesting.
One of you doesn't even have a room.
There's this whole strip with Calvin and Hobbes about being cool. Hobbes shows up and goes, they're like, Calvin's, I'm being cool. That's what I'm doing. And Hobbes goes, so I want to be cool. He's like, can't just be cool. You have to work on it. And so Hobbes goes away and he comes back. He goes, I'm going to be cool. And he goes, wait. He's, I'm wearing these Mickey Mouse pants. And he said, look at these big yellow buttons. I'm so cool. Hell, if those aren't cool, that's not cool at all. No, you need to be this. And so Hobbes disappears. He comes back. I'm cool now. And he's got this sombrero this size. Look at the size of my hat. Everything about it brings me so much joy that coolness is defined by the person. Like the hat is a massive hat.
Amazing. I'm trying to figure out a way to connect that to our guest, Darren Kennedy, but there's no way. I don't know. How can you do it?
I can fully connect it.
Okay.
I don't get fully connected because it's one of the things. So this concept of what brings you joy, the decision that there's somewhere, I really do want to dig into this. So I'm kind of giving away a little bit here. If this is on the front end if we're talking about this in the beginning, that this conversation he had with his ELA teachers about the content, about the curriculum, and changing the books to match the challenges that the kids had, as opposed to teaching the books that brought the teachers joy. The teachers love these books. I understand that feeling. God, there were so many when I taught ELA that I was like, oh, this is the one. The House on Mango Street was my jam. I still love that book. I love her writing. But that was because I loved it, not because there was no clear thing that the kids were struggling with that book specifically helped them with. I didn't think that way at all. And I loved when he talked about that. If I'm telling the audience, listen for this section, it is one of the best examples of thinking about content as it relates to improvement of learning. It's not just, let's read a book together.
I love it. That's a great way to introduce our guest today, Darren Kennedy. You're listening to an Imperfect Leader, the Superintendents and Leadership Podcast. I'm Peter Stiepelman.
And I'm Jamie Amansan.
We'll see you on the other side. Today on An Imperfect Leader, we're joined by Dr. Darren Kennedy. Darren is a district leader in the Sumner County Schools just outside of Nashville, Tennessee, where he currently serves the 29,000 students, specifically as a high school instructional supervisor. He's an experienced teacher, assistant principal, and leader who frequently writes about professional learning and project-based learning. And Darren, we're so thrilled to have you. Welcome to An Imperfect Leader.
Hey, thank you for having me, Doc. Appreciate it.
It is nice to see you again. We met at AASA, and you being a good steward of taxpayer money, you opted for Uber Share, and my traveling companion, who I hope will be listening to this when it airs. We were traveling from the airport. His name is Shelly Berman. Shelly's a good guy, and he was responsible for our Uber ride, and he also opted for a shared ride. But I think he thought he was just letting the Uber driver know that he and I were sharing the ride. And I hope I'm not maligning you here, Shelly. But so we approach the Uber, and the guy comes out to open up his trunk, and then you approach the Uber, and the driver looks at all of us and says, I'm only taking two of you. Why are there three of you? And you were incredibly gracious to let us jump in with you. And then I got to learn that you're from New Jersey. You got some New Jersey roots, and your leadership work is there as well, and have done some amazing things. So again, I'm thankful for the universe for putting us together. I really enjoyed our Uber ride. I loved listening to you talk about supporting kids. And so here we are. I mentioned how actually, I'm just kind of curious, what was your take on that experience?
I thought it was great. I said, how could I end up in a car with two retired superintendents and being married to the current superintendent? I guess it was just
it was meant to be. I just felt, if you ever watched the Muppet Show, the two old Jewish guys up, and that was us. We're just like, hey, you know, so you're a good sport. So I mentioned how you frequently write about education, and in fact, you wrote a book. So you think you want to be a principal, 50 Voices from the Field. I'm interested in the book. And not only because I have a similarly titled book coming out in October, leveraging superintendent voices, but I would really be interested in you talking about your book, because superintendents are going to support principal growth. They need to know what principals are advising each other. And so would you tell us about your book?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess right around the pandemic or post-pandemic, I had a couple conversations with superintendents, two sitting superintendents, when I was doing principal coaching and coaching special ed teachers across the nation, around seasoned principals retiring in the midst of COVID. And particularly this one district staffed, I probably lost around 60% of their seasoned principals, and they did not want to hire at a district. And by default, assistant principals who were novice actually just took the seat. And coupled with principals who were seasoned now having to navigate a new way of learning post-pandemic, a new way of supporting students, parents, the community, the building as a whole. And so I wrote the book for not only aspiring principals, but sitting principals, also for chief academic officers, central office staff, on how to support. It was a lot of new scenarios, new law. It's for pre-service administrators at university levels, and talks with several universities on using this as the 50 Voices from the Field, as including into their syllabi, because these scenarios or these voices are a lot of the things that non-academic issues that really lead to making a snap judgment. And the Voices from the Field is really set up for aspiring principals, higher ed, to really work through some really deep issues that may arise or eventually will arise in the building. And as principals, you can handle one situation wrong, and it will take you a long time to come back.
Yeah, it's almost career defining or dismantling. Yeah. I wonder if, so in the first book I wrote called An Imperfect Leader, I talk through, as a superintendent, you have a responsibility to bring a set of values to your district. And I interpreted that to be, I set the values. And so I brought, I think, 9 values to the district, and I sort of said, here are our values. And then all of a sudden in year 2, people suing the district from inside the district, internal employees suing the district. And I'm like watching all this kind of stuff like spiral. And I turned to a trusted principal and I said, I don't understand. We've got these values. And she said, oh, no, those are your values. Those are not our values. And so that's one voice that when I think about advice, when I provide advice for superintendents, like, oh, no, that's got to be an inclusive process with your student voice and teacher voice and custodians and nutrition services and your principals, assistant principals, directors, coordinators, everybody kind of saying, how do we want to be together? What are our nested patterns? What are our values? And I'm curious, 50 voices in your book. What's one voice that you find yourself repeatedly reminding people this is important to acknowledge?
I'll stick with the values piece because I just had this conversation just this week with an administrative team around values. and walk them through a process, especially when you're a new principal or principal going to a new building, retooling the culture, looking at the vision and the mission statement. But one of the exercises that I find myself coming back to on values is using that social emotional approach as an admin team to say, hey, no right or wrong answers, define values for me. And they write down the values and then we share out, hey, no right or wrong answer, define beliefs. Because the values and the beliefs of the administrative team have to be a coalition, a collaborative effort to be on the same page as an admin team. And then you can do that same process with your leadership team. And
they got to be aligned. And it's remarkable when you see that when they're not, in terms of things like I've seen a fundamental divide between decentralized and centralized. We need to let the schools make their own decisions and do their thing, and we're here to support them. Whereas centralized say we need to be able to tell the schools what they need to do and then hold them accountable. Those are very different beliefs. And if you've got the same team making decisions for the whole district, and I don't know if you've ever seen the iceberg model, but it's like what above water, right, on an iceberg represent the actions that you see being taken. And everything below has to do with the structures of that system, and at the bottom, at that base, are the beliefs and values and principles that drive it. And if they're radically different, then you've got real conflict.
Absolutely. I think one of the challenges from running an organization, whether it's at the building level or a large district, is the beliefs. You think about, just take religion. We all have different religious beliefs. You think about the values in your home, the way you eat dinner, the way I eat dinner. It could be totally different, and it is different. And imagine managing all those different beliefs in students and parents. And so coming with one clear vision and purpose and a why around why we do the things, I think is this where I keep going back to the values, the beliefs, the mission, and the vision. I think that's one thing I just constantly come back.
I love it. And we can find that in the book, yeah?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you think you want to be a principal, 50 Voices from the Field. If you're a superintendent, assistant superintendent, responsible for supervising principals, a great book to pick up. I appreciate it. So in the leadership model that I use to advise others, there's a dimension, collective aspiration. And it's actually, as we have just sort of following the conversation we're just having, collective aspiration is the heart of what we do as leaders. It's in that dimension that exists a term, positive connectedness, that willingness to be vulnerable. So you said no right or wrong answer. How do we do this? So it's that some people call it psychological safety. Staff members, students, they all needed to thrive. Let's talk about students though, because the idea here I want to explore is building a supportive culture first before anything else, which is something I believe you just talked about in terms of the culture that you set before anything else. And so drawing on your decade as a secondary principal and your current work coaching school leaders, how do you see school leaders really successfully prioritizing that student social emotional well-being and then in creating that safe and supportive environment while also addressing their academic needs?
Absolutely. I've seen, and I'll say post-pandemic, I've seen a real hardcore shift on focusing on the whole child, from MTSS to eye contact when entering the door, handshake, character strong, a lot of safe spaces in the building, adding additional staff for students to unpack what's happening in their community, what's happening in their home, classroom space. I've seen talking circles. I've seen spaces for peace rooms for teachers. I think that was one of the cool things I've seen.
What is that?
It was a room where if a teacher was having a stressful day post-pandemic from going from learning remotely or the lack of learning loss, if they were feeling stressed, it was a room where it was calming. There was a fish tank and just a space for them to relax if they had that moment. And so that was really cool. It was one of the really cool things I saw. And then giving teachers the same emotional support that we give students, because we know that trickles down. So I've seen a real hardcore emphasis around knowing every student by name. And then that in turn breeds into personalized learning, actually mirroring the two of looking at where the student is as a whole, academically, and then behaviorally, to really start to break down the barriers and close that academic achievement gap. As Maslow's hierarchy of needs says, that the number one thing is that sense of belonging. And I think the sense of belonging constantly changes based off of what happens out there in society. So we adjust as educators, are flexible. But overall, I want to give kudos to teachers and administrators for just being resilient.
I want to follow up on, so safe spaces seems interesting, or these safe rooms for teachers. I imagine some never want to leave because it's like a really quiet spot. You mentioned sort of circles in classroom. And I think before the pandemic, educators understood the value of that class meeting or the restorative circle, just that sort of circling up in the morning or at the beginning of class, just sort of doing almost like checking the oil in your car. How are we doing kind of thing. I think they now see it as even more essential if in fact the environment has been radically disturbed, that you can't do a real sort of conference and see where people have been harmed and how to restore if they haven't actually built relationships with each other. And what you're just describing to me sounds exactly what schools should be doing. And I recognize you're now responsible for lots of buildings, interacting with lots of educational leaders. Are you seeing, I guess, what appear to be some of the, why don't we take it from an appreciative lens? Because an appreciative lens would say, these are the things that are going well. And so how do we get more of it? So as you step into schools, one of the things we ask leaders to do is just like, how does it feel when you're in that building? Because then you get a sense of how people are respected. And so what are some of the things that you're seeing in your own district that you would say, look, this is going great and I wish we could see more of it?
I would say the character strong piece.
Yeah, what is that?
Or the door plus one more, which is explaining where you are literally greeting kids as they come in with eye contact, getting to know them by the name with the fist bump, high five. That goes a long way, pre-K-12, actually getting that the notice on the first day. These are some of the things that, we try to get teachers to do on a normal basis. That for the door plus one more is a really good, solid, character strong piece that we believe in. And I watch it work. I think it really personalizes the building, whether you have 1,000 students in high schools, a large 1,800 students. I have watched the beauty of students that permeate down to students of they drop a book, students are picking it up. I mean, class in high school, class change can seem chaotic. It's not chaotic. I mean, it's really a good community of we support each other. We're one beat, one sound. And so I really see that piece of the teachers building that relationship, getting to know their students, really translating into the student culture.
Yeah. And you see trickling down. I imagine it also trickles up in terms of administrators providing that same sort of like energy and enthusiasm for the teachers who they serve. And then hopefully central office, when they are present and able to be in buildings, are doing the valuable work of blessing the good work that they see in a school. Because, it's hard work being a principal, and you want the recognition. It doesn't have to be huge public recognition, but just knowing that your effort is seen, recognized, appreciated, and valued.
Yeah. Roland Barthes says
I love Roland Barthes. Go.
The relationship between the adults in the building has a direct relationship among the students in the building, and I'm a firm believer in that.
I love that. The Roland Barthes I always run with is, because I am sometimes a type A individual, I know that will shock some who listen, that he would say, settle on excellence. You do not be so infatuated with perfection. And it just, to me, it was such a good reminder, like, stop perseverating over everything's got to be perfect. It's okay. Like, excellence is exactly fine. It's exactly what you want to be pursuing.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I mean, it's and like an MTSS model. Like, we get so nuts sometimes when we're like, but yeah, you're always going to have kids in tier 3 that are just going to need that support.
Yes, sir.
And there are days where I'm in tier 3. So there you go. I want to ask you a question I ask every guest who comes on the show. How does the term an imperfect leader resonate for you?
I think we are all imperfect. I think I had the beauty of leaving brick and mortar for 5 years and reflecting on my own practices as an assistant principal, central office administrator, et cetera. I think I've had the beauty of stepping away and be able to reflect. I couldn't imagine a principal stepping away from 5 years now and coming back. When you're in it, you're in it. And one of the things that I always try to preach is that we are reflective practitioners. And sometimes it's just hard to turn off the principal switch, which is 7 days a week. Your mind is thinking about something. And that's where my mind goes of we can always do better, but having that time to reflect as a team is a crucial part that I often think that leaders don't get enough time to do with like-minded leaders or with leaders in the district. Because one of my answers is some of the best answers for your district is within the district. We just need to carve out the time for principals and leaders to talk to each other.
This is Greg Meyer, Jamie's partner at APC Leadership Collaborative. Superintendents know that school principals are the single biggest lever that any school district has for improving student joy and success. Unfortunately, there's very little professional development for the specific things that a principal has to do to improve their school. At APC Leadership Collaborative, we specialize in coaching principals to take on audacious goals, build their leadership skills, and make big improvements in their school. If that inspires you, let's connect and talk about how we can collaborate. Find APC Leadership Collaborative online at apccolab.com.
Hey, district leaders, I know you already know this. In schools worldwide, cell phones are posing real challenges on student engagement and mental well-being, and I want you to meet Yonder, a proud sponsor of An Imperfect Leader. And let me share this story from a visit I made to some schools in Silicon Valley. I asked some kids what they liked about Yonder, and after some funny looks, they shared that actually, with Yonder, teachers don't have to battle with them over phones anymore. In fact, one kid said to me he didn't have to worry anymore about his parents texting him in class, and the kid next to him sort of shoved him and goes, "Texting? My mom used to FaceTime me in class." I want to introduce you to a support system that increases teaching and learning. I want you to discover why 1 million students choose Yonder daily. Minimize distractions, maximize learning potential. To learn more, go to overyonder.com. YONDR. We're back for segment 2 of An Imperfect Leader called Imperfect Leadership in After Action. And my guest today is Dr. Darren Kennedy of the Sumner County Schools in Tennessee, a leader and an author. And in this segment, we ask our guests to deconstruct a decision that they made, and then we talk about it. So here we go. What happened?
Awesome. I will go back to 2014 when I became a principal of a middle school that was probably in the lowest 5 to 10% academically performing in the state, Tennessee. There was a heavy emphasis when I became the principal of intervention. Kids are fighting from the rear. We need intervention. Coupled with every single acronym. You need PBIS, you need PBL, you need IXL, you need iReady, you need everything. And so when you're going into a turnaround situation, one of the research-based models I used was John Cotter, which is having a sense of urgency around the work and change. And so the sense of urgency, it's a sense of urgency, number one, and number two, you build a coalition, make sure the coalition have the same values, then you can move forward. And one of the things where we decided on was the intervention piece. We carved out, we called it whatever time. In that time, we really focused on student weaknesses with teacher strengths. And we purchased everything out the wazoo to close this achievement gap. And we moved the needle just a little bit. So in reflective practitioner, and I asked one of my esteemed mentors, and her answer to me was supplemental curriculum will not be the sole reason to close the achievement gap. Focusing on tier 1 instruction is where you probably need to spend your time. So the aha moment with the sense of urgency reflecting back is really making sure that the teachers were implementing the curriculum with fidelity in tier 1.
Amazing. Before you go on, I want to make sure I understand correctly, because I think what you're describing is exactly how superintendents also would describe certain sense of urgency, whether it's for a principal, they're hearing it from their immediate supervisor. You've now inherited this school district. We think that there could be great achievement, improvement. We've put you in charge of it. And here are every bit of intervention to serve as really, we've got a sense of urgency. We got to make improvement. Superintendents get a very similar set of marching orders from their board of education that say that school is not doing well, and so you got to do something about it. And we often think that we only get a certain number of years, so we're going to do it quickly. And the real work is in that tier 1, the universal application of great instructional practices that are going to absolutely get to that. So you get to your 80 and 85%. And then interventions possibly get implemented as a way to supplement, not supplant, good instruction. So did I sort of capture that, like what your experience was? You had the sense of urgency, and maybe what got overlooked was, and what you were helped through with good mentorship from a loved one, which is, hey man, take a step back and improve instructional practices among your teaching staff.
Yes, absolutely.
So let's talk about that process, because now you've been putting a ton of energy and training around getting people trained in all these interventions, whether it's PBIS, which for behavior, IXL for academic stuff, whether it's the iReady stuff, whether you got a lot of folks that are adopting lots of different ways of trying to implement change. So now you had to go to your staff and say, we got this, we may have overlooked something here. How did that
So
go?
I did a lot of work with my leadership team, and I always say your building leadership team serves as two purposes, which is a thermometer and a thermostat. And I always say the difference there is a thermometer reads the temperature and the thermostat changes the temperature. And so getting that temperature gauge from my building leadership team on intervention, whatever its focus time, and then now switching to an instructional round model where we're going to our problem of practice and backwards mapping design. And what we did was, of course, to build that coalition and that the values and the collective aspiration. I might have misquoted you there, but that aspiration was, well, we've dealt with so many changes in the past, and turnaround schools often have leaders that change. But we did it through a book study of The Art and Science of Teaching by Marzano. And so we started with the why behind the work, to not just say, hey, we need to really focus on tier one instruction, but here is a research-based model. Each grade level or each grade level and content were responsible for taking a chapter and then presenting it out at a faculty meeting, which I wholeheartedly believe that faculty meetings are PLC meetings. They are PD versus lesson plans on time, posted duty. I can do that through an email, changing that narrative and changing that time for us to have a PD time, really level set of the why behind. We needed to really focus on tier one instruction with the research. And then we really got into best practices. I do, you do, we do, those type of things. That was another book that I use. And I'm an avid reader, High Impact by Jim Knight, High Impact Instruction. It really tells you and breaks down, why do you do the I do, you do, we do.
Right. It sounds like what you did, you took a step back and said, look, any of these sort of turnaround schools we're told that we should implement reforms. And reforms are one size fits all, high pressure situation. It's coaching for compliance. It's that kind of stuff. And really, it sounds like you and your leadership team and then the entire faculty, and again, for superintendents, I think it's very similar, is that you move towards a transformational model, which is, hey, look, we're going to do peer coaching, the rounds. That's peer coaching. That's giving someone who's an expert in a particular area can provide the most meaningful feedback, as opposed to just having one individual, the principal or the superintendent, walking through and giving feedback. And so it's that kind of stuff.
Yep, absolutely. And a coaching is really effective. I mean, everybody deserves a coach. Everybody needs a coach. And so,
totally. Why is it that athletes and musicians get them, but then all of a sudden teachers, what? And then these cycles of inquiry. So instead of waiting to the end of the year to see that you didn't make the improvement you hoped to make, it's these regular cycles of what's going well. How do we get more of it? So it sounds like you really made a shift. How long did that take in terms of,
so in one school, it took me 3 years to
that's actually still fast.
Yeah, to get back to reward status, which is the highest status in the state of Tennessee. It took 3 years. And the base of the problem was we were lecturing too long to middle school students.
Sage on the stage.
Was too. So we did Sage on the stage. So we went to a pretty format. We let teachers have autonomy, but we said, hey, when we walk in, we want kids to be greeted. We want a bell ringer. After the bell ringer, if they're 12, you can no longer lecture than 14 minutes, their age plus 2 minutes. And after you lecture, then we wanted to go into differentiated instruction. After differentiated instruction, you as the teacher make yourself as one of the rotating stations. Of course, we're working with the same standard, but it might be 2-digit multiplication in 2 minutes time. But over here, you might have 2-digit multiplication word problems that you have to unpack. You're still working on the same standard, just different activities. And then after that, we want to close down with a check for understanding with an exit ticket. And we want to make sure that we give them feedback before they leave and come back tomorrow. So a
real protocol with, in terms of what you're teaching and how there's some freedom of, because if you read the Marzano book around, you want to make sure you're being consistent also with the beliefs in the text there.
Correct. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's hard. One of the things that I had to reflect, they say, what was the hardest thing you ever done as a principal? And I was like, the turnaround work was hard, but it has recently changed to change a fixed adult mindset is one of the hardest things that I've ever had to do and especially when the building has been successful to change a fixed.
Oh man. Yeah. Look, two things come to mind when you say that. One is those schools that have been successful with a very traditional model. And then you say, in some ways you're a lucky school because the socioeconomics here are so high that didn't matter. But yet you're trying to find opportunities to give kids real, authentic, relevant learning, where, and relevance needs to be defined. In my mind, it's of student interest that is not just preparing them for work, but rather preparing them to be the kind of thinker that any employer would want, that they would, to be a successful citizen, to be a successful person. High interest, real project learning. That's hard.
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest knockdown, drag out educational conversations I've ever been involved with is when I challenge a sixth grade team to pick the same novels based off of our Achilles heel. So if we wanted to pick a book that was heavy on context clues, using context clues, let's pick novels where the author is actually really pulling that out. And it was the biggest fight you ever thought, because I've been teaching this novel for years. I've been teaching this novel for years. I've been teaching, and yeah, as GLL teachers are lovers of the language and lovers of the book. But when they were able to agree that the novels that they needed to pick really need to speak to the Achilles heel of the students, that was an aha moment. And that time we had the highest ELA scores in that grade level for the state. So that was powerful.
I bet that was a knockdown, drag out fight. Are you telling me what we need to do? Look at our scores. Yeah. Like, I know, but we could do better. All right. Typically, the after action review has what got overlooked. What'd you learn about relationships? I'm curious, and what could you have done differently? And so I guess looking back on this experience, you apply all these different interventions, you get your return. It's not necessarily the return on investment you had hoped for, marginal kind of progress. You do your own sort of reflective practice around what happened. And what happened was we were intervening on student skills and not taking that step back and recognizing actually we have to improve our teaching and instructional practices at the tier 1 level. What could you have done differently as you look back?
Great question. I think really at the time, I think I didn't have enough time to assess the situation because I was a late hire. And I think.
So you didn't get the opportunity to do the temperature. You didn't get
yeah. I didn't get to check the temperature. It was over the summer, couldn't hold an official building leadership team meeting. And I think the focus was just on closing that. It was a skills-based conversation. Our kids are coming in 2 or 3 grade levels behind. It was the skills. I think what I could have done differently is maybe assess the teachers, that tier 1 instruction, before moving heavy into intervention, right? Get solid of like, where are the teacher strengths in the building? I think that's something that I would have probably done differently to maybe move towards calibrating with my admin team on what best teaching practices were happening in the building and then build from there. But I think the sense of urgency, like I said, we had little games, but I think the sense of urgency, I probably would have switched to what is happening in tier 1 instruction right now? How can we improve tier 1 instruction? And then secondly, how can we fill those gaps first in tier 1 instruction with differentiated instruction, but we're still needing that time to work on targeted interventions in that time. So
that's really good advice. That's really good advice. There's an organization called the Water Center for Systems Thinking, and they have a set of cards. They're fantastic. The Habits of Systems Thinking cards. And one of them is the avoid the impulse to make a quick decision. And I think you described at the beginning of our conversation around the number of assistant principals who all of a sudden find themselves principals, right? And now they're named interim or acting or full principal. And they want to make a good impression for those who have just decided that they have the responsibility to lead a district or lead their school. And they make a quick decision around, all right, we got to turn this around quickly. And those who have now had some years to think about this and they see the value of getting a beat on the system or checking the temperature of their building, harvesting the collective wisdom of those who have been doing this work, and then making really collaborative decisions, shared leadership decisions around where to make improvements, and then you apply the interventions as appropriate. I think it's so wise. Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
So lastly, we'll return to the book because our last question is, what advice would you give to an aspiring leader? And I know you are married to a superintendent. You have done central office work. You've done building level work. And I'm curious what advice you would give to an aspiring leader thinking about the 50 voices that are part of So You Think You Want to Be a Principal.
Yeah, I think one of the things I think about is connecting with the right mentor. If you're serious about becoming an aspiring administrator, connecting with the right mentor, working through what the job is, what the job is not, focusing on transformational change, not transactional. A lot of the things that appear, as you see administrators do, they can appear transactional, but focusing on transformational work. probably a long list of things that I can just spell out. But I think really finding that mentor, the 50 voices from the field will really give you a true hard snapshot of some things that you will deal with. I think there is a perception. We focus really hard on the instructional leader piece. And I know you remember that. We need instructional leaders. We need instructional leaders. We also need leaders who can lead the human side of running an organization, because at the end of the day, you're working with humans. So we think about that great instructional leader, that level 5 teacher that's been a level 5, and then they think they want to get into administration, but then they don't know how to effectively communicate with adults or how to move adults. And I think really learning the human side of the work will be the longevity on top of being an instructional leader. But reflecting on that piece for aspiring leaders is really knowing situational leadership. Leadership is lonely. And if you read the book, you'll see you'll see some of the things that the questions that are asked, like you don't have to make a snap decision. You should really gather all of the facts before making a hardcore decision. Know the policies, know the laws, know that you can phone a friend, you have a support system.
Rely on that mentor that you just described.
Rely on that mentor.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
To give you some real core hard feedback on what it is and what it is not to lead a building. But a lot of the stuff, I see a lot of aspiring leaders not knowing what the non-academic comes. It's the football games, the basketball games, the parent interactions, dealing with social media. It's all of the things that I would say that come along with the job that you don't anticipate.
Our guest today was Dr. Darren Kennedy of the Sumner County Schools in Tennessee. And right at the end there, you really summarized for me how I have seen you, which is content expert and a human-centered leader. So thank you for reminding us about the importance and how essential it is to be human-centered. Everything else will thrive after that. Thanks so much for giving us your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Doctor. I appreciate it.
We are back. Darren Kennedy.
All right. That was great. Let's see. I have two sort of areas that I want to talk about, if you're okay with me guiding it today. Is that all right?
Please.
So Dr. Kennedy, you guys, there's something that you both opened and closed with that I think is related. And obviously this is coming up for me because I am this, but you need a coach. I thought when you asked, why do musicians and athletes have it, but not teaching, was profound. I was like, exactly.
Yeah.
The coaching aspect, both he talks about it from the position of a mentor, like making sure you have the right mentor to guide you through the job. And the reason being at the very front, you guys talk about that toward the end of the podcast, but in the beginning of the podcast, he's talking about his book and how the book can help principals handle a situation better. Because he says, if you handle one situation wrong, it will take you a long time to come back from it. And you said it's almost career defining or dismantling. And it had me thinking about a backup quarterback in the NFL as an example. They have failed multiple times all over. And yet there they are still. I mean, not that they're not working hard and not trying to get better. In fact, you know what they have? A coach to get better. But they failed a lot and they keep coming back and having a job to do. And that's not all, obviously, but with a principal, you fail, like even with a superintendent, you fail once, it's over. You know who you need? You need a coach. You better be practiced. You got to get ready. Is it fair? No, it's not fair at all. Why? Because anybody who's a first superintendent is of course going to fail multiple times. Having someone where you can get better and they can guide you and give you some feedback and walk you through it, role play, all those things makes such a difference, Peter. I can't emphasize it enough. That's what can make a difference in terms of you getting off on the right foot, getting the Brene Brown idea of the trust in the jars, the marbles in the jar. You'll get more marbles by having practice with someone else, a mentor or coach. And then by the time you do make a mistake, you'll have enough marbles in the jar that you won't lose your job for it.
That's interesting. I talked with Owens Saylor today in Kentucky, and he does a lot of work with superintendents in the state of Kentucky around development. And, one of the things that he said to me as we were discussing just the leader longevity and how we both are committed to trying to help leaders be able to stay in their positions longer, and that this podcast or in other respects, coaches and mentors can help really support so that you are making more predictably successful decisions. And he said that it's no longer really that it's a crisis, the fact that superintendents don't last for more than 3 years. He said it's just the new normal. And that we have to be then mindful of that. He said we have to stop talking about it as a crisis because it hasn't stopped. So this is kind of the normal. And so it's why this podcast, why the work that he does, why the work that you do at APC, like why it's so important to serve as that coach or as that mentor or to be that thought partner alongside you. And so like regular starting quarterbacks need those backup quarterbacks. They probably should come up with a different name for them because that doesn't mean that they're not good. I mean, they have to be ready to be able to step in at any moment. So they have to be NFL caliber. And I imagine they're also on the sideline calling plays, being a thought partner for the starting quarterback. And so it's almost like we get to be that sort of support as well. One of the things that Owen Saylor mentioned was that really what we're trying to be available for is this idea of eroding resilience. Is that so many superintendents and probably pro athletes to some extent,
Right.
they're given very few opportunities to make those mistakes or to fail, and they are quickly replaced. And so we see that with superintendents, and certainly we see it with principals too. So how do you create the conditions where it's okay to try and fail and use that as a learning experience so that you make better decisions moving forward?
I mean, I'll use that as a fractal, as a big example for what Dr. Kennedy talked about in relation to the shift in the classroom that he was looking to get. That when in his after action review, he talks about going in and being a principal of this middle school and having all of the external supports, the tier 2 supports, in order to shift a low performing middle school. And the advice he got from his coach was, focus on teaching. That all those programs could be helpful, but they won't change enough. In fact, when he did implement those programs, what he saw was marginal improvement.
That's right.
And so that the shift is that what you're trying to create in the classroom is a space where kids can fail and learn over and over again, that there's multiple ways for them to access information. He's basically talking about very clear, differentiated instruction, different approaches. But that's the fact that we're trying to create that in the classroom for kids and we struggle with it is, why do we struggle with it? The whole system struggles with failure. It can't let failure happen. So we struggle with kids failing. And then we tell kids they did it wrong.
So, okay, this is what I want to say about one of the things I was thinking about as you were describing this is those schools that have had great success in helping kids and being a part of a child's development, growth, and achievement are those that really do cycles of inquiry.
Yeah.
They recognize what's working for most, and then they can intervene for what may be just a slight area of struggle and then intervene even more intensely for those who are really struggling. And when you don't have those cycles, so you call it a professional learning community model or an RTI model or a multi-tiered system support model, whatever you want to call it, I don't care. But what matters to me is that you're incredibly thoughtful about what you're trying to achieve, what children need, and then meeting that need, and really focusing on that universal, or what is often referred to as that tier 1 instruction. And that's what Darren was talking about. I was so quick, and I have been victim of this, is because an intervention protocol or program, some kind of box arriving gives you a sense of hope. Oh, great. If we could learn this, then we can really intervene and help kids. And it's, well, hold on a second. Let's just look, like, if 60%, 50% of our kids are not meeting what we said is the benchmark for what we're trying to achieve, that's a tier 1 issue. And we got to, it's not intervening for kids, it's intervening for the adults. What do we need to learn to do this better?
Brother, dead on. I love that. Dead on.
And it's so hard. It's so hard, no doubt, because they're not cogs. They're kids.
No, they're people. The adults. The adults are saying, yes. I work my butt off.
Yes,
it's
you do.
really hard.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It really is. And because this third grade team of teachers will not necessarily be the third grade team next year, particularly in a metropolitan or urban district. And so now you've done some professional learning, upskilling, and then the next year you've got a whole new teacher or teachers on that team who need some foundational skills. And that's really frustrating for those who have been there for now a few years going, oh, we're doing this again? Oh, we're working on this again? So that's about the only time I'll use the word differentiate, because I like it for teachers in terms of what do you need to keep getting better. For kids, it's something we say a lot, and it is so hard to do. It's so hard to meet needs.
But I really had mixed feelings, both great and, that's so interesting what they did here when he said that, he said basically they're lecturing too long to the middle schoolers. And I'm like, I love that you know that. I love that you know the brain science behind 1 minute per year of age plus 2, which is funny too, because that presumes that it goes up. It does not. So as older adults, it doesn't my mom doesn't have 80 minutes plus 2. We start to diminish.
Sorry, I was going to say, because I have a parent who is the same age. It's nope. I got to get in and out. I got to get to the point.
Exactly. And so that's me too, right? So eventually, mine goes down as well. Everyone's goes down. But then I want to read the structure that they gave. He said, so we went to a pretty structured format. We let teachers have autonomy, but we said, when you walk in, we want kids to be greeted. We want a bell ringer. After the bell ringer, they can lecture for 12 plus 2, so 14 minutes total. After that, into differentiated instruction. And in differentiated instruction, you as a teacher make yourself one of the rotating stations. We're all working to the same standard, different stations focusing on different things. And then after that, we want to close down and check for understanding with an exit ticket. We want to make sure that we give them feedback before they leave and come back tomorrow. I'm like, hallelujah.
Yeah,
exactly.
I agree. Hallelujah. And that's so hard.
Yes, because it's also, that's very rigid. You gave them a structure that they have to follow. The thing is, someone told me this about the literacy programs to fidelity. If you have no common literacy program and everyone's teaching something different that isn't necessarily research-based as it relates to literacy, that's why you go hard or tight around fidelity, and so you go tight in order to get people understanding why lecture for 12 minutes, no more. Why differentiated instruction, the differentiated tables, and you being one of them.
Oh my gosh, you're really talking about so many things that have plagued us over the years. I just think of, and why you say we're going to be tight right now, like this whole loose tight thing, we're going to be tight on this, and then we'll have a gradual release. We'll get there. I actually had a really nice conversation with Ellen Dorr. She's the Chief of Technology and Strategic Initiatives in the Renton School District. We met for coffee yesterday, and Renton is just outside
right near you, right?
Seattle, exactly. Yeah. And we were talking about a lot of things, and one in particular was she was a middle school teacher. She loved middle school. And so, listening to how tight one needs to be around what he was describing, how difficult that can be, particularly at middle school. I taught third grade. You can get there. No problem. Those kids are fairly compliant. You walk on water. Yeah. So creating those centers and then watching and maintaining that you're actually doing what you're supposed to be doing in those centers, as opposed to just being like, they're in centers and then they'll focus when they're with me. Really hard work. I stand really in awe of those who can do it. And yet it's still absolutely appropriate call for a classroom, for a school, for a district to say, this is what we believe of what high quality instruction can look like.
It's what I harp on in every system partnership that I have when it's system level, but it's also with even if I have a partnership with just a teacher team. Instruction is everything. How you teach matters more than what you teach. And that's what he's talking about here. I do have one nit to pick as a pedagogy guy. And he talks about, he used Marzano and then he used Jim Knight's high impact instruction. And he quoted the I do, we do, you do. So the framework that we use that comes from out of Chapel Hill by Sharon Ritchie called First School. This is a 10-state study or 12-state study over 10 years about high impact instruction. It isn't just I do, we do, you do. It's I do, we do, you do together, you do alone. And the you do together, skipping that step, you're actually skipping the most powerful part of instruction, in that the metaphors that can be used between students is greater than any metaphor that you can provide.
It's something you actually said last week in terms of even if they're off topic and talking, it's still
better.
So important.
That's her research. That's her research. Her research.
Well, I listen.
It's so good. And so that's where I'm like, oh no, there's one step here. And that's what he mentioned in the structure, that differentiate, those small groups working on different things. If the teacher's not there, he's basically saying, you do together. So they're in the structure that he presented to the teachers.
And I think what we have missed, at least in my past work, is that we may have missed the you do together and then in our own mindset to say, and that's okay even if they're off task a bit, they know what their goal is and what they're working on, and that there's power in the conversation. So
there's power in their ability to assess each other and having them say, here's what I'm trying to figure out, and telling someone else.
Yeah.
I loved it. I still love that frame. And I just love the way Dr. Kennedy talked about instruction generally. I feel like he was just speaking my language, and I'm like, if he wants to talk instruction anytime, I'm in. Plus Nashville, sure, I'll go to Nashville. Sounds great.
It's a great town, right? So it's where ASA is this year, so that's nice.
Yeah.
One of the things, I guess, in closing that I would say is it's encouraging when we get to meet leaders who are so. Here's the thing. I recognize that superintendents really have to be civic leaders. We've heard that now over and over this season.
Over and over.
This, particularly during these fraught times. And it's also refreshing when you meet a leader who is also wants to talk about instruction, knows their role in terms of civic leader and politics and all that. Like, we need to have those episodes. We need to be thinking about that.
Yes.
And it's almost, I don't know if it's a palate cleanser or just a reminder, we're in the business of education and teaching and learning. And isn't that great?
It is great. What's great about the superintendent in Sumner County Schools is that they know that they need a Dr. Darren Kennedy to help them do their work, because Dr. Darren Kennedy is holding an instructional frame as it relates to the principles that are trying to create
That's a really
strong
good
instructional
point.
leadership.
It allows the superintendent to be almost freed or liberated, or just to know that work is ongoing because there are so many other things pulling their attention and their talent.
One of the things that I got to have a meeting with Dr. Rachel White at a UT out of Texas. And she said she teaches a course on finance for superintendents and budgeting, basically, and how budgeting works. And I said, what's the biggest aha of any new people becoming superintendents once they take the finance course? And she said that they need to hire a CFO. I was like, oh my gosh, that's my entire
If you
strategy.
had asked me, I would have said that they don't realize that 85% of their budget is people.
That's interesting. I still think I love the fact that her aha
But that they realize
that having people that can do a thing that you don't know how to do is helpful.
Yes, I love that.
Right.
That's funny. And she has a pretty interesting perspective also because she was a school board member. So, she's got, and school boards, if they're doing their jobs well, one of their big pieces is approving a budget. And so they're going to ask you tough questions, and they should, about how does this expense or this expenditure or this decision to try to raise revenue, how is it going to support student learning, experiences, and all those kinds of things.
And we're full circle as we end this thing when you guys starting the whole podcast with sharing an Uber in order to not waste tax dollars.
Taxpayer money. Be a good steward.
That's right.
All right, Jamie, this has been fun. I will see you next week. Everybody, you've been listening to An Imperfect Leader, the Superintendents and Leadership Podcast. Please don't forget to give us 5 stars. We really appreciate our friend in Kansas who just gave us one this past week. So thank you.
As we say, 5 stars. You can say anything. 5 stars, though, please.
See you next week.
Bye.
Music for An Imperfect Leader was written and arranged by Ian Varley. Sam Falbo created our artwork, a wood print inspired Daruma doll butterfly. Remember, imperfect leadership is not a scarlet letter. It's a badge of honor. It recognizes that serving as a lead learner is about being a vulnerable leader, an empathetic leader, a compassionate leader. We are proud to be imperfect leaders, so join us next time for another episode of An Imperfect Leader, the Superintendents and Leadership Podcast.